Mass deportations are underway for more than 12,000 Haitian immigrants in South Texas. They have been living in a makeshift camp near the border in Del Rio. Most of them are Haitians who traveled to South America after the 2010 earthquake. The Department of Homeland Security is trying to deter more from making the trip. Activists say the U.S. should not be deporting these people.
More than 300 Haitians arrived back in their home country Sunday, and more deportation flights are planned this week as the U.S. government tries to process the more than 12,000 migrants camped out near Del Rio, Texas. One migrant says he was in detention for 4 days in the U.S., 4 days without brushing his teeth, 4 days without a shower. With this section of the U.S.-Mexico border closed, many of the migrants tried to cross the Rio Grande over the weekend, but were confronted by Border Patrol agents on horseback. 36-year-old Haitian migrant Alex Rossier says if he is deported, he will die in Haiti because there's no security in the country. Valverde County Sheriff Joe Frank Martinez wants the federal government to do more.
It takes too long to process an asylum claim. You know, the system has been broke for 40, 50 years. It's used as a political football, you know, from one agenda to the next.
Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas says the U.S. government is working to move thousands of the migrants every day to processing centers.
We have sent a very clear message early on, in light of the fact that we are in the midst of a pandemic, that the border is not open and people should not take the perilous journey here.
In that interview, Secretary Mayorkas was asked whether there is a contradiction because the U.S. is allowing Afghan refugees to resettle in this country, but deporting Haitians in need. The secretary says those Afghan nationals have been vetted and screened and are being flown into the country, which in his view is different than simply showing up at the U.S. border.
So first off, how did so many Haitians end up at this particular camp in Texas? That must have been a very, very difficult journey. How did so many Haitians get there?
Well, one important thing to point out is that the vast majority of these Haitians did not leave their homeland recently. A great many of them left Haiti years ago and have been living in South America, primarily in Brazil and Chile, until earlier this year when many of them decided to attempt this long and dangerous journey to the United States. So a lot of them have been in Mexico in different shelters and parts of Mexico waiting to come to the border. Others have been in camps in Panama, and many have walked by foot overland through the jungles in Panama. So it's an incredible long journey to reach the U.S. border, and you know, we're seeing extraordinary numbers arrive just in the last week.
And tell us about the U.S. efforts to expel many of these migrants. What has happened over the past few days? What's your latest reporting?
Well, really just over the last 36 hours, the Biden administration has ramped up its deportation flights to Haiti. They're attempting to try to break the momentum of this border influx by sending more removal flights, as they call them, to Haiti. There were 3 that landed yesterday, bringing 327 Haitians, and today there are 3 more scheduled. Most of the Haitians who are being returned are not being formally deported. They're being expelled under Title 42 of the U.S. Public Health Code, which basically gives the administration the power to kind of bypass normal immigration laws in a state of emergency, as we have with the pandemic, and to simply board them onto planes and send them back.
And does this new sort of pandemic law trump a migrant's right to try and claim asylum? Because I understand that many of these migrants say they are fleeing poverty or even fear for their lives there in Haiti. So where does that asylum status stand?
Well, the Title 42 authority that the Biden administration is using essentially gives the U.S. Customs and Border Protection the ability to bypass asylum protections and simply expel the migrants, as they've been doing. As many viewers will recall, the Biden administration is not using that authority on unaccompanied minors who have been arriving in record numbers this year. And it's not using it on the majority of family groups that are coming across. But single adults are especially subject to this authority. And again, even if they wish to make a humanitarian claim or to seek asylum, the Title 42 power gives the administration the ability to just put them on planes and return them to their homelands. I should add that, the asylum element of this is tricky, given that, as we just talked about, many have been living in South America and Haiti and are not necessarily being an immediate threat to their lives, because poverty, for example, is not a grounds for asylum protection in the United States.
Right. Good point. So, as we know, Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas is now in Del Rio, Texas. What can we expect from his visit?
Well, the Department of Homeland Security said he's there to get an in-person operational update on what the U.S. Border Patrol and other federal agencies are doing to handle this incredible influx and to see for himself conditions in this camp. We've never seen really anything like this, with so many people arriving so fast to a single location along the border. Mayorkas is going to address reporters in the next hour. I think we can expect he'll get questions about these expulsion flights and other logistical matters related to the camp and how the administration is.
If you could clarify something for me, these huge groups of migrants were able to cross the border, or is this an international space that is sort of a no man's land?
No, they have crossed the Rio Grande into the United States by essentially walking over a concrete spillway. The water levels in the Rio Grande are low right now, basically because of seasonal factors, and that has opened up, the ability for these folks to wade across. One thing we saw is for much of the past week, they used that concrete spillway area to walk across into the United States and access that camp. The water was only about knee high. Texas state troopers, under orders of Governor Greg Abbott, have shut down that particular path. And what we've seen really in the last 24 hours is the Haitians have moved to a different part of the river. They've set up a rope across the river to hold on to as they wade across through deeper water with more dangerous currents. But many of the folks who are going back and forth are buying food and other supplies in Mexico for the camp. We keep hearing that there isn't enough food in the camp. So this is essentially a supply line going back into Mexico. And again, no one has ever seen anything like this, where there's a giant camp on the U.S. side of the border and people coming to and fro into Mexico to supply it with food and water and other things.
And so, believe it or not, I think you all get it. And it literally, I guess I know you all know it. I'm sorry to go on so long. Thank you.